It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today I want to talk about Docker and firewalls. So when we start running our Docker containers, there's a lot of things that go into play as far as how you set up those containers, and a lot of that is your port mappings. So we talk all the time about doing port mappings, and I can give you a real quick example here. I've got this Docker Compose file for an application called MStream. It's a really nice music streaming application server, which is pretty great, and I'll have a video coming out on it soon. But right here you can see we've got this port mapping that says 8200 is being mapped to port 3000 inside the container. So inside the container, this is really where the MStream web server is running. But I'm saying, you know what, 3000 is already taken on this machine, so I'm going to map a different port to it on my host. So this is the port that I would use to get to MStream. The thing is, when we do this, Docker in the background likes to go and automatically set up a firewall rule in IPTables for itself, and it uses two different users. One's called Docker and one's called the Docker user. And what it does is it basically punches a hole in your firewall saying, hey, port 8200 is open on this machine. So even though you think you've set up your machine firewall, Docker has gone in and said, okay, I'm going to put a rule up here at the top of IPTables above all of your rules, and I'm going to open up this port because you mapped it, so obviously you want to be able to access it. Which is true in a lot of cases, and like in my network where I have multiple devices and multiple machines running on my home network, and I have Nginx Proxy Manager running on a different machine than this one here that has MStream on it. So if I want to forward the traffic over here, I need to be able to access not only the IP of this machine, the public IP of the host, but this port, so that Nginx Proxy Manager can proxy that traffic through for me from the outside. Now the good news is, Docker only messes with the firewall on your host machine. So if your host machine is inside of your home network, and you have a firewall that blocks all of the traffic coming in from the outside, which you should have. If you're running a router, if you're running anything, even if you're not running a router and you have your host machine hooked up directly to your modem from your ISP, you need to put something in between your modem and your machine that can act as a separate firewall. This is really important just for security, because firewalls on your computers are as good as they are, I just don't trust them to be the best. So there's actual firewall products out there like pfSense or OpenSense or Fire, IP Fire I think it's called. There's lots of them that are open source that are really terrific, and they're made to be a firewall. That's what they do. So highly recommend you set something up between your modem and your machine. But assuming 98% of you, if not more, are using a router, the router should have a pretty good firewall built into it, and you should have the ports closed on that router. All of the ports should be closed, and if you're running Nginx Proxy Manager, the only ports you should have open should be port 80 and port 443, and those should be forwarding directly to your host, and they're not really open, they're being forwarded from the outside to your Nginx Proxy Manager host. Now once you've got that, you can use Nginx Proxy Manager to proxy all of these machines, and that's great because you've got that separate firewall appliance that's protecting everything inside of your network. So this doesn't become such an issue now. If you're in a shared environment with your internal network, it's you and it's your roommates and it's, you know, your brother, your sister, whoever, and if they are at all technically savvy, this could be a problem, because what this says is you can go to this port and access this application whether you're using the proxy or not. I want to say thank you to all of my patrons over at Patreon and my subscribers on YouTube. Thank you so much for all of your support. I love doing this channel. I love making this media and this content for you. I hope you enjoy it as well. I do post all of the videos now over at Patreon after one of my patrons made the suggestion, and I don't know why it didn't dawn on me before that. But if you're interested in seeing them through Patreon and getting a notification through Patreon instead of through YouTube, or hoping that YouTube's algorithms happens to show it to you, jump over and become a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com. I've got the links in the description and the show notes. I appreciate your support. Thank you so much. So if I open up Firefox, now I'm not going to use MStream as an option here. Well, I might. Let's just see. 192.168.7.51. What was that? 8200. Yeah. So there we go. So I went to 8200 and I get to MStream. if they know the IP address of that machine or the host name of that machine, and they know what port you're running MStream on, they can get to MStream, whether you wanted them to or not. Now, you could have login credentials and things like that, but this is running in HTTP. This is not HTTPS. I did not route through that. The problem is, even if I set up Nginx Proxy Manager to say proxy me to this machine, I'm gonna check it out. You know, then let me see it. So I've got another one running on a different server. I've got MStream running on a different server, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go check out what port it's running on. So let me open up Portainer here, and we'll just take a look at that machine. Give me 1 second. I've got several different servers that I'm checking out here, and we'll go look at our containers. And right here we've got MStream. And on this one, I'm using port 8051, so we can do the same exact thing we just did, except I'm going to change this. Now, that one, I'm using Nginx Proxy Manager to give me SSL-based access to this machine. But I can still go to 125:8051, I believe is what it was. And there we go. There's my MStream that runs on that server. So I've been able to work around the proxy and get to this thing by the port number. And this is something you'll see no matter where you run Docker. So if you're running Docker on a VPS, that VPS actually has access to your stuff through the port number. Unless you put up a firewall and then use Nginx Proxy Manager to route around that. But if you just put a firewall up on that VPS, Docker goes in and says, hey, IPTables, I'm going to put a rule above all of your other rules that says go ahead and allow this port. This is a problem, right? Because it makes it not as secure as it should be. So there's a few ways to fix this problem. I've told you what the problem is. Docker likes to open these ports, and it's to make things easier for you in the long run, but with the assumption that you'll be running a firewall appliance in front of it or something in front of it that stops that traffic from getting directly to that service at some point. Now, running this on my LAN, it's fine. It's just me and my family, and none of my family knows what these ports are. None of my family would even care what these ports are. They don't want to do anything nefarious. Hopefully your roommates are trusted people. Hopefully your family are trusted people. But there's a whole wide world out there of people who you should not trust. And there's good reason for that. It's not that every person in the world is bad, but there's enough bad ones that you should be a little bit wary of hosting your personal information and data where it could be accessed from the internet. So one, the first mitigation is run a firewall appliance on your network. So today I use Eero. Eero has a firewall built in. My Eero doesn't have any port forwarding rules except for 80 and 443, which go directly to my server that runs Nginx Proxy Manager, and then that proxies the traffic through from the outside to the machines that I want, and I expose the services that I want. But that firewall being separate from my host machine blocks any requests like to this port right here. So if I tried to go to routemehome.org and I said 8051, sorry. You see I can't do it. It's not going to connect because it says, well, I don't know how to get to that port. That port's not open. My firewall on the outside blocks it. If I go to routemehome.org, you'll see I get the congratulations page of my Nginx Proxy Manager because that's the only place I can get to. If I try to go to port 81, I still can't get there. I can't get to the management console of my Nginx Proxy Manager, which is what I want. So my firewall on the outside is doing its job. It's stopping that traffic. But let's just assume for a minute that I go set up something on a Ocean VPS. Alright, so here in DigitalOcean, I've got this server called test.osia opensourceisawesome.me. Now, I've already installed Docker, Docker Compose, Nginx Proxy Manager, and Portainer, and it's just running out there on the internet, and this is the IP address, and I should be able to go to it. So let's just try test.osia.me. And there we go. We get Nginx Proxy Manager, it's the main page. So now I want to go to port 81 to manage it. And here you go. You can see that it's going to come up. So let me just get this set up. Alright, so you can see I've got it set up. I'm going to go over here to my proxy hosts, and there are no hosts right now. So I'm going to set up a quick entry. I'm going to call this manage. That needs to be my Docker address. Still works, and we get there through HTTPS, which is great. That's what we want. We'll also be able to get to Portainer if we go to test, or if we just go to osia.me, port 9000, and here's Portainer. And there's the list of containers, but I'm still accessing this through the port. So if I don't want to be able to do that, I need to set up one more proxy host. And now we're accessing it through encrypted traffic. So this is all good things. This is great. This is what we want. The problem is I can still get to it through the regular port. test.osia.me:9000. So now I've come to the Portainer page, but I'm no longer in the encrypted version. I'm getting to it through kind of a back way workaround. So this could be a security issue, and that's the thing I want to talk to you guys about. So in your different VPS environments, things like DigitalOcean, Linode, AWS, everything like that, you have a lot of options of ways to try to protect this traffic. So in DigitalOcean, you can go over here to networking on the left, and we're going to go to firewalls right here, and we're going to create a new firewall. And we're going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this test.osia.me-firewall. Okay? So you see it's already got SSH allowed, which is great for inbound, but I also need HTTP and HTTPS. Now, if you don't want to have HTTP access to anything, you can turn that off, but Let's Encrypt needs to be able to access something through port 80 in order to issue the certificate through port through 443. The nice thing about Nginx Proxy Manager is you can tell it, you know what, if they try to go to port 80, you just force them around to 443. So it doesn't let that happen. Now down here you have outbound rules as well for things that can call out. I'm just going to leave the defaults. I'm not going to mess with that right now. And then you pick which droplets you want. So I'm just going to type in test.osia.me and I'm going to hit create the firewall. There we go. Now, if I go back over here, where I'm accessing this through 9000, I'm just going to erase all these little shortcuts here. So if I try to go to osia.me:9000, it should not let me through. It should give me an error here in just a second because it's going to hit the firewall. There we go. And now I can't reach it. But I should still be able to reach port.osia.me. And there it is. So now I've basically created a firewall rule. I've created a firewall in front of my server that stops people from getting around to the port. So I've kind of created a little LAN and put a firewall in front of it again, even on a VPS. So make sure that you're using those tools out there. Make sure that you're allowing those tools to work for you and that you're doing things in the most secure way possible. Now, another thing that you can do is use something like Cloudflare. So here you can see I've set up opensourceisawesome.com in Cloudflare, and then I'm using Cloudflare's DNS, and I'm using a lot of Cloudflare's tools. Now, I'm not a Cloudflare expert, but I can tell you that when you add something like this, it really makes a difference on what can reach your site. Cloudflare starts putting things in place to stop you from getting to that site on different ports. So I'm just going to give you a quick example. I'm not going to go through the Cloudflare setup today. I will link some videos in the description that you can go check out that have much better knowledge of Cloudflare and how it works. IbraCorp is one of the ones that has a really several great videos on how to use Cloudflare, so I'll link those in the description. But it's definitely worth looking at, and they do have free options for Cloudflare, which is pretty great, and it's kind of an unlimited number of domains, so that's really awesome too. But I'm going to go and show you what this can do. So I'm going to open up one more tab here. And I'm going to go to opensourceisawesome.com and port 81 because I do have Nginx Proxy Manager running on here. And you'll see there that it's thinking and it's trying to get through, and it's like, hey, I'm trying to request this site on this specific port. You should go ahead and let me through there. And you can see that it's not going to do it because basically I've got Cloudflare acting as my server block. So for SSD nodes, if any of you have ever used SSD nodes, this is what I run a lot of my stuff on SSD nodes. It's much less expensive than DigitalOcean or Linode as far as the resources and stuff that you get, but the speed you pay a little bit for. You know, you lose some speed, you lose some I guess what I would call performance with SSD nodes, but for me and for the use that I have, it's perfectly fine. Don't misunderstand. It's perfectly good stuff. but they do not have the option to set a firewall in front of your server. So this is where Cloudflare comes in, and they kind of help you provide that service to protect you from people going to your sites on ports you didn't intend. So it's not going to go, it's going to sit there forever and ask. So now if I go to opensourceisawesome.com, yeah, so I'm trying to get somewhere and it's like, hey, you don't have a valid SSL certificate for this thing, so that's not going to work. Now, if I go to shownotes.opensourceisawesome.com, so here you can see I get right to the site, I get right to the stuff where I've got the documentation for all the videos that I make, and it's really easy to get to, but again, it's being protected by Cloudflare, and then it's going through Nginx Proxy Manager to proxy that traffic to the proper container in the background, but I've got it where the ports are blocked so that people can't work their way around into my stuff, hopefully. This is just another way to secure things. I can't stress enough how important security is, and a lot of people have pinged me about it and asked me about it and commented about it. I am not a security expert. I can give you the basics to get you started, but you really have to take it upon yourself to go learn about security and learn the best ways to do things in a secure way. It's really important when you're going to self-host, when you're going to self-host things from home, that you understand the security implications of having open ports on your firewall, of having things forwarded through to all kinds of machines everywhere. That's where great tools come through, like Traffic and Nginx Proxy Manager or HA Proxy or Caddy or whatever you want to use. Use something as a proxy so that you're only allowing access to one machine and really controlling how that access works through your system. Make sure you've got a firewall in front of your servers. Make sure you've got a firewall that is going to do its job properly. Don't just depend on the firewall on your machine. Now I'm going to go through one more thing. So let's just say you're in a local area network like a school, like a university. Hopefully the university has things to block you from getting to other people's machines. Really, they kind of assign IPs in a way that you can't go and hit other people's machines. There's things they can do in their routers and in their systems that block that. Hopefully they're doing that because that protects you, that protects the other users, but there's ways to work around it as well. So if you're trying to run something like Docker with a Docker image and you're wanting to access that, but you don't want other people to be able to get to it through those ports, and again, you're trying to use Nginx Proxy Manager, and again, I'm just throwing out ideas. Maybe all the stuff that the school puts in place keeps you from doing this. I don't know. You have options like a VPN. Only allowing access to that Docker container through your VPN is really, really important and really useful. There's videos out there on how to do that. I've got one on how to do that. Definitely go check that out. But if you're running this thing and you go out to the Docker documentation, you'll see that there's this page and it's called Docker and IPTables. And there's pages for Windows and there's pages for macOS as well. But it says you can add IPTables policies before your Docker rules. Now there's scripts out there that people have created to do this. I have not audited those scripts. I don't know if they will work properly or not, or what they're doing exactly, because I'm also not an IPTables expert. I'm more of a GUI kind of person when it comes to firewalls. I am definitely not a command line kind of person. But down here you've got a couple of examples that they're giving you, which says restrict connections to the Docker host. So I only want this IP to be able to access my Docker host. Now, if this is the host you're running on, this is great because now you're setting up Nginx Proxy Manager and you're saying, hey, when something comes in, I'm the only one that can go to my Docker host, right? But here's kind of how you would do that. You would put in the command IPTables-I, which means inbound, an inbound rule, Docker user, again, -I think that's an I, yeah, it is. Now this you would replace with the actual name of your interface. So it might be ETH0, it might be ENS01SP3 or something. They've got different ones, so you need to figure out what your interface is called that you're running your network through. It could be your wireless interface. But then you've got the pipe and then -S, 192.168.1.1. Of course, you would want to use the IP that you want to have access to this Docker container. And then -J and drop. So this basically says, if something comes in and it's not this IP address, drop that connection. Don't allow it through. Now they're going to tell you what to do if you want to allow all ranges inside your local area network. You would change that 1.1 to be 1.0/24. And /24 says any number after that third dot is allowed to access this thing. Otherwise, drop it. Now, if you put /16, it would be any number after the second dot. So it would be 192.168 .0 through 256 to .0 through 2, or 0 through 255 through 0 through 255 for those last two numbers. So just depending on what you put here depends on how much you're opening this up, but this is the way that you could do this. And again, you put this above the Docker user rules. So now they tell you, hey, here's the way you can do this for accepting through the source range. IP, again, inbound rule, Docker user -m IP range -I. This is your interface again. And then you've got, I think that's an exclamation point, actually. That's not a pipe. I'm going to blow this up a little because it's even too small for me to read. Yeah, that's an exclamation point. Okay. And then I'll bring it back out for you guys so you don't go blind trying to look at this stuff like I do. Then -- source -range, and then 192.168.1.1 through 192.168.1.3. So these three machines with these IPs can access it, but anything else is going to get dropped. So .1.1, .1.2, and .1.3 are the machines that can access it. So you can do a source range as well, and it's really useful and really smart to do it this way. I think this is a great little bit of information. I think it's important information for you guys to have. I hope that you've gotten something out of this. I hope that you'll get out there and start securing your containers and making sure that things are working the way you expect. And just know that when I'm showing you how to set up these containers, I just want you to get them set up and running. But again, you've got to keep security in mind. Even though I'm not going to show you that on every single video that I do, you should always have security in your mind in the background and make sure that you've got some kind of barrier, whether it's a firewall, whether it's a firewall appliance, whether it's a firewall in a virtual private system, a virtual private network. It doesn't matter, but make sure you've got something there that blocks people from doing nefarious things. It's super important, and it's important for you to understand how that works. And the better you can get at these things, the better it's going to be. So you guys that are IT pros, feel free to add comments. Jump over to the discuss.opensourceisawesome.com rocket chat. I'm going to put an open source security section in there. I'd love to see some questions, some discussions, some thoughts about that as well. I know this is important to all of you guys. You wouldn't be self-hosting if you weren't worried about security and if you weren't worried about other people having your data. And this is just one more step you should take to protect your data. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along the journey with us. And I'll talk to you next time.